We'll also have interviews of other parties vying for your votes, with Alex Salmond of the Alba Party, David Kirkwood from Reform and Richard Lucas from the Family Party. And time for our final leader interview now with one of the smaller parties, the Scottish Family Party. They're putting forward candidates in 16 seats. And I spoke a little bit earlier, before the debate happened, to Richard Lucas, who's leader of the party. And I asked him what his party's main message is and what he felt was perhaps missing from the debates.
Well, our main message, as ever, as the Family Party, the clue's in the name. We want to promote pro-family policies. We think family breakdown is the root of many problems in society. The things that will be missing in the debate this evening, I would suggest the primary one from our point of view was that just before the election was called, the Parliament was due to vote on full decriminalisation of abortion, which would have allowed abortion up to full term, which as far as we're concerned is a horrific evil. So for us this should be a top priority, but I would be very confident in predicting this won't get a mention in the debate this evening, but we think this is a very grave issue.
So far so good. Fair question, given the opportunity to answer.
So a lot of people will agree with you, but they might not agree with your tactics. I mean, standing outside abortion clinics when people are trying to access health care, that's intimidatory, isn't it?
I wouldn't say that's our tactics. As a political party, that's not something we engage in. The words you use there are not an accurate reflection of what goes on. I mean,
holding up banners and
a banner saying
silent prayers.
A banner like a lady holding up a placard saying, "Ask me about my abortion," or a placard saying, "We can help." I think to describe that as intimidation is
it's judgment, though, isn't it?
But these vigils, they do see women change their mind at the last minute. Now, to my mind, that's saving lives.
Fair question, given the opportunity to answer.
You say you're about tradition, but isn't the truth rather more sinister? I mean, you've taken part in an interview recently with somebody who was linked with a fascist party. Last year, you had a candidate who was found to have links to neo-Nazi groups. You wrote recently that the SNP has turned most Scottish schools into Green Party indoctrination camps. I mean, rather than being about traditional values, you're quite extreme, aren't you?
No, let's start with the first one. The first one is a gentleman by the name of Simon Crane, who used to be in the Family Party. I became aware of his, what I would regard as sort of white nationalist views. So we had a chat, and I explained this is definitely not what the Family Party is about. So he decided to leave and to go on his own into another party. I think he's formed another party now in Scotland. So that's someone who left the Family Party because I made it clear that didn't align with his views.
Simon Crane left the Family Party years ago, but there were big protests about the Gender Recognition Reform Bill January 2023 in front of the Parliament. He was there were lots of people milling around, lots of people filming, interviewing on the cameras. He said to me, "Can you just explain while you're here? Can I just record it on my phone?" I said, "Yeah, that's fine." I knew he had a YouTube channel. I didn't know what party he was in, I don't think, at the time then. So why did I do that? I think people with, well, say white nationalist views, I think are quite dangerous in many ways. So why did I speak to him? Well, I don't think it's helpful to totally isolate people, because I think that just leads to them becoming more and more extreme and they develop a victim mentality. I don't think that's helpful at all. And whatever audience he had, if I could state my message to them, all to the good. Was it a mistake to just speak to him for 20 seconds on camera then? Possibly, I don't know. But it's a very busy event. It's a bit like these things where someone has a selfie taken with someone, then it turns out that that person's connected with such and such an organisation. Which for prominent politicians, it doesn't really matter because everyone knows what they're really like. But for the Family Party, they try and play it up to try and make out this reveals the true nature of the Family Party. Found a candidate with links to neo-Nazi groups. Well, that's news to me. I assume what he must be talking about there is that Niall Fraser did an interview with Simon Crane as well. But the BBC got their way. It gave them their excuse to put the words fascist and Nazi in the interview with me, which is completely outrageous, totally fictional narrative they're trying to generate, and that's the way they try to generate it. We talk about parties. All parties have had representatives that have embarrassed them in some ways or another in the past, and the interviewer can choose to bring those points up if they choose to. I mean, with the SNP, Alex Salmond's record with regard to his behaviour with members of the opposite sex is imperfect, shall we say. Neil Hanvey, one of their two MPs, was elected while suspended from the SNP for making anti-Semitic posts. They don't bring any of that up. How about the Reform Party? The Reform Party has stood down, I believe, 4 candidates in Scotland in this election. Let me tell you a bit about them. Kilmarnock and Loudoun constituency. He made dozens of posts advocating gun ownership. He said the days of trans people are numbered, and said 3 Scottish equalities organisations are taxpayer-funded paedophile services. Mid Dunbartonshire, their candidate there, reacted to a picture of Humza Yousaf holding up the Scottish rugby team's cup along with his wife. And the candidate posted, someone should have taken that off him and shown them both out the door. He's more Pakistani than Scottish. I'd say that's just outright racist. The Edinburgh North and Leith candidate, it's reported in 2015 he was accused of spitting at a Green activist. He's denied the allegation, claiming instead he made a gesture that resembled spitting. Their West Aberdeenshire candidate made comments about cannibalism, suggesting that the human race should be obliterated due to its impact on the planet. And a quote given was, mankind has dined on the flesh of its fellow man for as long as we have been able to communicate. Cannibalism is natural. Now, those comments about those Reform Party candidates in Scotland at this election, I haven't looked into them. I don't know, there might be another side of the story. But from the BBC's point of view, they had far more ammunition to go down that road with reform had they wished to. But they didn't want to. They ignored all that. It seems in the media, the reform gets a free pass. I mean, immigration, we don't really talk about immigration a great deal. I mean, we've got our policy. I'm not sure it would be much harder on immigration than what Labour or the Conservatives say in election campaigns. So if anyone's going to be called, far right, surely reform should be more vulnerable. I'm not saying it's true, but they should be more vulnerable to that allegation. But the BBC not interested at all in pursuing that line, but they're trying to label the Family Party as far right. I think the key thing is the pro-life issue. As soon as you're pro-life, as far as the BBC is concerned, you're evil, you're nasty, you're bad people, and you need to be portrayed like that. So we were portrayed as, he used the word sinister. And there was nothing remotely like that in his interviews with the other leaders. Green Party indoctrination camps, I would have been very happy to explain what I meant by that, but there was no opportunity to, because there was too much in one question, and you haven't got the opportunity to reply to all of it.
And what about the chap last year who was shouting 4-letter insults at the First Minister?
Right, Niall Fraser wasn't representing the Family Party when he did that. When he did do that stunt,
He was your candidate in Rutherglen, wasn't he?
He has been our candidate. When he did that, he wasn't representing the Family Party. But let's remember, Humza Yousaf had invited people to say F off to people who they regarded as racist. Now, Niall's point that Humza Yousaf's infamous white speech in the Parliament in some ways could be seen as racist. I think you can make a case that was a racist speech.
Right, but to use 4-letter words isn't exactly reasonable, is it?
I spoke to Niall about that. Niall apologised.
Right, it was always going to happen. I was always going to be asked about this. Niall Fraser explained to me his plan to go along and say to Humza Yousaf, F you, as Humza Yousaf had instructed people to do. And I said to Niall, don't actually swear, just say F or something. Don't actually say the word. But anyway, in the heat of the moment, he did, and he apologised. Right, had Humza Yousaf not have asked for that, had that just have been out of the blue, then that would have been totally unacceptable, and that would have been someone's association with the Family Party concluded. I mean, in this election, one of our prospective candidates, a few weeks ago now, made an obscene comment in an online discussion, so he was chopped. He was chopped. This happens to all parties in every election. There'll be some candidates which embarrass the party. I would say to the BBC, though, BBC taking the moral high ground about bad language. I mean, and the BBC produces something that's a modern adaptation. What that means is it's absolutely full of foul and abusive language that they broadcast over the airwaves continually.
You also talk about unifying people, yet you're anti-LGBT, you're anti-abortion, you're anti-agenda. Some would say even you're anti-women to some extent when it comes to equality policies. You don't like an awful lot of people, do you?
Well, that's just a ridiculous characterisation. As a party, we don't have any view on LGBT relationships. LGBT relationships. In terms of education in school, I think the transgender message is very harmful. It's very destructive to young lives. It tears families apart. I think the message with regard to LGBT relationships in schools is controversial. There's a diversity of viewpoints within society. If you look at the traditional teachings of churches, for example, Children are taught in Scottish schools, for example, that the Catholic Church's teaching on sexuality is point blank wrong. It's not let's have a discussion about this, it's not let's learn about different perspectives. The lesson that children are taught in most schools in Scotland is that the Catholic Church's teaching is wrong.
Okay.
We think that amounts to indoctrination.
We will need to leave it there. Richard Lucas, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Anti-LGBT, anti-abortion, anti-transgender, I think that's what he meant, anti-women, you don't like people. Now, how anti-abortion amounts to not liking people, I'm not sure. But that's a very, very hostile question, which again I would say, a very, very hostile question. That's absolutely fine, as long as you're given the opportunity to answer it. But in this case, I couldn't. Because it slung those four things out. So it's slinging mud and then not giving me time to respond. So it's like inviting me on for an interview, giving a speech about the BBC's opinion of the family party, and then not giving me time to reply to it. So it's using the interview time to express the BBC's opinion. That is not an interview. Now, I think on reflection, I watched Alex Salmond's interview. I watched the Reform Deputy Chairman, whoever it is, interview, and watched mine. My questions were far and away the toughest and the most hostile. Now, what I'm going to show you here, I've just edited out what I think were the toughest and most hostile two questions from the other two leaders' interviews. And after I'm showing you the toughest and most hostile two questions from mine. And you can see that there is no comparison whatsoever. It was absolutely on the warpath with me. With the other two, well, they were sort of okay. It was more of a pally discussion there. Challenging, but respectful and given the opportunity to reply.
You didn't say a vote for the SNP was a vote for independence. A vote for the SNP back then was a vote for a white paper and then for a referendum.
Yes, indeed.
But the UK government might just turn around and say no. You don't think there's a problem in hospitals when you even go out for a meal in a restaurant or whatever, that companies tell us that they're actually struggling to hire staff? So we should take your word as an engineer and dismiss the overwhelming majority of scientific opinion. You say you're about tradition, but isn't the truth rather more sinister? You also talk about unifying people, yet you're anti-LGBT, you're anti-abortion, you're anti-agenda. Some would say even you're anti-women to some extent when it comes to equality policies. You don't like an awful lot of people, do you?
So this reaffirms the Scottish Family Party's policy of scrapping the BBC licence fee. Now, in previous elections, sometimes I've had an interview with the BBC and they've been just like this, appalling, aggressive and mocking and snide. But then progressively successive ones, they've become more respectful. And by the time I've got to the last one, they're actually sort of okay. So let's see, maybe that will happen this time, or maybe that's it. Maybe that little clip is going to be all they're going to give us. Now, obviously, when you hold socially conservative views, when you're pro-marriage, you're pro-life, you value mum and dad and the kids as family. If you hold those sort of views, the BBC wants to present you as a bad person. They will be extremely hostile towards you. Then you've got a choice. It's decision time. You could choose to say, oh, I'm going to shut up from now on, or I'm going to say I don't really believe those things after all, and you could just try and solve the problem by going along with the BBC and basically saying that's not really what I think. Or the other option, of course, is you can keep speaking because you think what you've got to say is important. And no prizes for guessing the option that the Scottish Family Party is going to be choosing. Okay, thanks for watching.